According to the U.S. Department of Justice, over half of all prisoners and jail inmates in the U.S. suffer with a mental health problem. Specifically, 56% of state prisoners, 45% of federal prisoners, and 64% of jail inmates. To put this in perspective, 10.6% of those in the U.S. have met the criteria for a diagnosable mental illness. Those that suffer a mental illness are 4.5 times more likely to be arrested than those without mental illness. Among the jail inmates with severe mental health problems, 54% have manic symptoms, 30% have major depressive disorder, and 24% have a psychotic disorder. 76% of people incarcerated have a substance abuse problem. Do you see a trend here? Legally, these prisoners are entitled to the mental health services such as the counseling that they need in order to ever get better. After passing the First Step Act, a bill that addresses concerns of individuals with mental illness in 2008, our president tweeted, "My job is to fight for all citizens, even those who have made mistakes. This will keep our communities safer and provide hope and a second chance to those who earn it. In addition to everything else, billions of dollars will be saved." Sounds great, right? Unfortunately, inmates suffering with mental health disorders rarely ever get treatment. Only 1 out of 3 in state prisons and 1 out of 6 in federal prisons receive proper treatment for their diagnosis since admission. Here lies a major issue. One of the major goals of incarceration is rehabilitation, which is meant to reduce an inmate's chance at recidivism. Yet rehabilitation programs are not being enforced. Budget constraints are the number one reason, followed by space limitations and the limited number of counselors available. It is not feasible to expect individuals to become healthy in an unhealthy environment. This is why jails and prisons need to provide mentally ill inmates with the proper treatment. This, in turn, will allow a better transition into the real world, reducing recidivism. Prison inmates have the same right to mental health services that are available to those outside of prison. When did prison become home to so many suffering with mental illness? It started in the 1960s during deinstitutionalization. In theory, releasing mentally ill patients from hospitals sounded great. Those with mental illness could go into a less restrictive setting and still receive the treatment they needed. What could be wrong with this? Well, here's the problem. Only half of the proposed community-based health centers that were intended to replace the mental hospitals were actually built due to the financial distress of the federal government. As a result, prisons became the new mental hospitals. Psychiatric facilities went from having a 550,000 population in the 1950s to a 70,000 populations, while prisons grew from 178,000 to 5.6 million today. It is clear that prisons became the new mental hospitals after deinstitutionalization, yet in prison, no services are guaranteed. Dr. Stuart Gracian, a psychiatrist who studied solitary confinement at Harvard for 25 years, made a comment about prisons saying, "You're looking at the population of a state psychiatric hospital." After deinstitutionalization came the war on drugs. In the 1970s, the federal government cracked down on all drug-related offenses, creating 2/3 increase in federal prison populations. As stated before, 76% of those incarcerated have substance abuse problems. Given the comorbidity of mental illness and substance abuse, the number of individuals with mental illnesses behind bars once again skyrocketed. A common misconception from the public is that providing mental health services to inmates is a waste of taxpayers' money. What may surprise you is that providing these services is actually more cost-efficient than paying for them to return to prison. If we invest in mental health programs, we would lower incarceration rates, which would save money that would be used to pay for all the prison costs that comes with another sentence. Plus, we would be creating more contributing members to society that would be able to help our country by holding jobs. For those that suffer with mental health issues, therapy can play a huge role in treating their illness. It is no big surprise that suicide is a common occurrence in prison. About 12% of prisoners are at risk for suicide, and so many more suffer with other issues. An inmate's encounter with a psychologist in prison is usually the first time they get to tell their life story and express their pain verbally, and to receive input on how they can make life choices to act in a less damaging way. After all, these inmates are human. Prisoners were once asked to define what they saw as being therapeutic. They responded with, a place to be themselves, to be in control of their own lives, and the opportunity to value and be valued by others. Prisoners are stripped of these therapeutic ideals in prison. That is why therapy is one place where healing can occur and should be available to all that are incarcerated. Without therapy, how can emotional healing take place? Not only can predisposing mental health issues hinder an inmate's chance at success after incarceration, but the prison environment itself creates new issues that need to be addressed in therapy. That is why working to reduce the potential negative effects of imprisonment is so crucial to a transition to life beyond bars. In prison, inmates tend to take on the criminal identity. This is merely a matter of survival. They must seem macho and not show any weakness. When criminals are living together, it gives them the opportunity to share their deviant skills and attitudes, and this alienates inmates from the rest of society. It is easy to fall into their group mentality in prison, which promotes crime as soon as they leave. Part of the therapeutic work in prison is using the time of incarceration to improve oneself instead of letting the environment pull them deeper into a life of crime. In addition, environments such as prison can aggravate and amplify mental health conditions. Prisons can be a harsh, violent, and psychologically damaging environment that is both depersonalizing and dehumanizing, which leads to hopelessness. This itself can create depression and even PTSD. Sexual assaults are not a rare occurrence in prison, as well as fights and other experiences of trauma. After incarceration, this depression and PTSD can manifest in more violence, which will send them behind bars once again. Warden Andrea Tack says life after prison is a difficult transition because you've been in a place where you're continually traumatized. For those that experience solitary confinement, this brings about a whole other set of issues that stacks the odds against the inmate being able to function socially in society. Being socially isolated causes people to slowly deteriorate. One prison inmate by the name of Rasho initially went to prison for robbery, but had depression, schizophrenia, and borderline personality disorder. The different things he had seen in prison would trigger him so that he would act violently and assault guards. His sentence was extended and he was placed in solitary confinement where he experienced hallucinations, self-harmed, and even tried to kill himself. Rasho is just one of many. Dr. Gratian states, "They're not the worst of the worst. They're the sickest of the sick. Maybe they weren't even that bad before they got in, and they just get worse and worse. It's a tragedy, absolutely immoral to see that happen to people." Regardless of having a mental illness, all inmates can benefit from therapy. In direct work with offenders, a clinician should focus on 3 areas of rehabilitation. First, the person's crime or criminal career, what motivates them, triggers them, the risk factors for reoffending, and choices for an alternative lifestyle. The next goal is to identify needs for readjusting to society, such as education, work training, relationship skills, and anger management skills. Lastly, they try to identify ways of overcoming blocks to a stable and crime-free readjustment to society, such as confronting their drug and alcohol addictions. Receiving therapy as an inmate can help oneself and in turn help the whole prison environment by promoting better coping skills instead of turning to violence. After all, one cannot get healthy in an unhealthy environment. When inmates receive the mental health care they need, it prevents them from cycling in and out of the criminal justice system. Mental health services can encapsulate a variety of approaches, so where do we begin? I believe the most beneficial service would be cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. The basic idea behind CBT is by changing the way you think, you'll be able to change your actions. Criminal behavior is the result of criminal thinking. If we work to adjust this thinking, offenders will change their criminal behavior. Criminals are stuck in a vicious cycle of their own destructive thinking, and we need to help them find a way out of this trap. With CBT, even the most serious offenders can change the way they feel about themselves and others. In cognitive skills training, professionals can teach inmates how to solve problems, deal with social situations, and control their anger. They can stop them from problematic thinking, such as, I'll never snitch, I'll never back down, I'm going to take what I want. If anyone disrespects me, I'm going to attack. Research shows that CBT reduces reincarceration rates by 35%. So what would this entail? Safer communities, intact families, and more workers. In addition, we would save $31,286 per inmate per year. In addition to CBT, the 76% of inmates that have substance abuse disorders need proper addictions treatment. 20% of inmates are incarcerated for drug-related offenses. 1 in 3 people admit that they committed their current offense under the influence of drugs or alcohol. 1/6 committed their crime in order to get money to buy drugs or alcohol. Imagine how much we could lower the number of people in jail if we treated these addictions. Studies show that those who use drugs are more likely to commit violent crimes. Among half of those incarcerated who identified as regular drug users were incarcerated for murder, manslaughter, rape, robbery, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. Giving these people the treatment that they need to overcome their addictions may also lower the overall crime rate in our country, as violent crimes are correlated with drug use. The last proposition I'm making is to offer a therapy that focuses on mindfulness and gratitude. Through cultivating greater awareness and compassion, mindfulness encourages a shift away from fear-based and often antisocial or criminal strategies for meeting needs. With this comes a shift towards pro-social strategies, personal growth, and a greater sense of possibility for the present and future. Mindfulness programs in prison have demonstrated an increase in emotional intelligence and a decrease in prisoners' levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. Programs have also shown correlations between attendance in mindfulness trainings and a reduction of reincarceration rates. Let's take a look at Ken, who had quite the reputation at Oregon State Penitentiary. He had been a criminal his whole life, stating, "I wanted to be the baddest criminal anybody had ever seen." He was seen as a convict leader and a threat in prison. The administration at the prison decided that with CBT, he could change. They believed that the pain he inflicted on others came not from what others did to him, but his own problematic way of thinking. With the help of a trusted counselor, he created a goal. I want to be an honorable man. Once out of prison, he was able to marry, hold a job, and be a tax-paying citizen. It has been 20 years and counting since his release from prison. People like Ken show us that we are all able to change if we are given the opportunity to better ourselves. What do I want you to take away from this? Prisoners are human beings. In fact, they are even more vulnerable to mental health issues than the general public and have the same right to care just as any citizen does. We cannot expect inmates to improve their behavior if we don't help them replace negative thinking patterns. I'm a firm believer in second chances, but if nothing changes, then nothing changes. That is why we need to improve the mental health services that are available to the incarcerated. Then a healthier transition to the real world will take place, and reincarceration rates will go down, helping society as a whole.